Hello and welcome back to the Recordertron channel. So today, slight change of plan from my original schedule. I was going to be reviewing Mr. Origin, Mr. Marshall Origin. Still am, still in the process, but in between that happening, I've come into possession of this big chonker. And like, what are HiWatt doing? Why is this thing not everywhere? And why is it not more widely available? This is a 150 watt solid state amplifier from HiWatt. And I kind of got switched onto this because I've always, known about HiWatt and they've always been in my sort of orbit. I've always appreciated them. Obviously, the valve offerings from them are very expensive, two thousands of pounds or dollary dues, depending on the part of the world or whatever currency you have. Very, very expensive. So when I saw this on Anderton's, I believe they're about 350 free. So I'll put the price up for you. But what is going on? There is a 50 watt version of this as well, which is even cheaper. It's like 250 quid or something. And I feel like you could probably get away with that because this is blisteringly loud. Even by, it's a lot of watts, but you can usually tell with an amp when you first start turning it up if it's going to be one of those ones where everything happens after, the halfway mark on the volume, or if it's, but this is straight out of the gate, really, really loud, which is really good because it means you've got a ton of clean headroom, which this amp absolutely excels at. I think this is like, if you want a big amp sound and a big amp feel, and you want it to be a pedal platform, this is the one to get. You've got the orange Super Crush, which is down there, which is also a great option, or the lead top, which I'm all a fan of. But yeah, this is just, it's just beautiful. And the cleans are like really, really impressive. I think they're some of the best cleans that I've got out of an amp period. And I know that HiWatt are sort of renowned for their clean sounds. I believe they're, a lot of people compare them to sort of Fender's sort of amps, and I agree they are very similar. But yeah, the only downside is they seem really quite difficult to get. I got this through Anderton's, and they're very often not in stock, and as soon as they're in stock, they're out. I think they get like 2 or 3 in or something, and then they're just gone. You can see why. It's because they're like really good amps, very like insignificant amount of money, and they deliver. So yeah, I just had to get this in, and I think there's a lot of the demos I've seen on YouTube are like, they're okay, but they're either like doom metal, which is great and all, but if you want something a bit more dynamic, it's not really great. And a lot of the other ones are kind of just not super thorough. They're just kind of like little sound bits. So I want to try and go into a bit more detail with it and do a lot of variation of sounds and guitars, much like my previous review, because this amp is just, it needs to be on your radar if you can get one. And therein lies the rub. HiWatt, get yourself together. I think they're a smaller outfit than a lot of the other big, companies, but if they could churn these out, the thing is as well, it feels really great as well. Like, it feels really premium. Like, it doesn't feel like, you're sort of rocking up with, something that feels less. It just feels great. It feels and sounds great. And I want to go into a bit of detail with it and, give you sort of my personal pros and sort of cons of the thing. But yeah, let's crack on and have a look and make some sounds. Yeah. So as with my last video, for the signal chain, we're going through the Tube Screamer Mini into the Victory Kraken preamp, and we're also using the reflecting pool and the orange fur coat fuzz. I have actually swapped out the Kraken since I did this video for another pedal, so that won't be appearing in the future, but yeah, on with the rest. And once again, we're going through the 2 notes torpedo captor with the vintage V30 sim into my Complete Audio 2, and then that's all going into the laptop. So, as you can hear from the clips with the Jazzmaster just then, the clean sounds are really, really like full and lush. They don't sound sort of sterile, which, you know, can occasionally be a thing you can get from solid state amps. You know, they always tend to do really good cleans, but, you know, on occasion they can be a little bit sort of, you know, lifeless, I guess, but not with this. It's got that real nice sort of reactive, sort of warm feeling, you know, that gives it some life, you know. And you can hear when I'm sort of digging in a little bit on some of the passages that it kind of breaks up in that natural way that you'd expect from, you know, like a tube amp or something. So yeah, just phenomenal stuff, like really, really nice cleans and sort of pushed breakup cleans as well. Definitely going to be using this a lot for my sort of big ambient sort of sounds. And yeah, it's just a really, really good clean amp. And I'm going to move on to some a mixture of sort of clean bits and also some more overdriven parts as well. I'm going to be using my East Coast LP1, my Fender Player Series, and also my Epiphone SG Classic with the P90s. So that's the stuff you're going to see coming up now. So yeah, let's have a look. So something I want to point out as well is that this amplifier has a frankly irresponsible amount of low end to it. It's like proper disgusting, but in a good way. So essentially, and I think this is one of the reasons why it feels so good in the room, and that's something that I feel in the past have been lacking from my solid state experiences, is the low end response in this is just through the roof, to the point where you need to be careful with it, because I've got the bass dialed at just over a quarter, and it's already creeping into the territory where it could be a bit unusable. Now, I guess it depends what you want from it. You know, if you're playing extremely low-end heavy music like sort of doom or sludge, you know, you're going to be gangbusters with this thing. But for everybody else, the low end is really, really nice, but you've got to be just careful that you don't go into boomy territory. So just watch out for that. And I think for me, the sweet spot is around the quarter of the way up. So yeah, and that's something that nobody else seems to have covered. So yeah. So there is something I want to point out with this amp, which could be a bit of a sticking point depending on what sort of setup you run. For whatever reason, the clean channel takes effects, overdrive, everything in the front, no problems at all. Crystal clear, everything's just as you want it to be. But for some reason, the overdrive channels, I've found with effects going into the front of the amp, which is what I primarily do, it just doesn't play well at all. You kind of get this very sort of artifact heavy, sort of mushy mess of a sound, which doesn't sound great. And that's with the amp's overdrive channel, I should say, which the amp's overdrive channel sounds really good. If you were running, you know, kind of a setup where you wanted to use that and supplement it with pedals, or if you wanted to go straight into the amp, no pedals except for effects. But I think you would need to use the effects loop if you wanted to really, you know, rely on pedals for your modular effects like delay and reverb, because it just doesn't seem to handle it very well in the front. You might like the sound of it, but for me it's kind of like it's not giving the desired effect, it's kind of just garbling it. So that is one negative I would say about the amp. But if you're doing everything through the clean channel with your pedals, you're golden. It sounds phenomenal, and you know you'll hear that in the clips. So yeah, it's just something to be aware of. But that's one of the few criticisms that I have of it. So yeah. Anyway, on with more stuff. So there you go. That's a bunch of different sounds from various guitars. As you can see, handles them all really well. The overdriven stuff is just, it's really, it's got kind of like a brightness to it that I really like. Really kind of cuts through, but without sort of being ice picky. And obviously you heard some samples there from the amps overdrive as well, which is really good. Very clear and present sounding. It's maybe a little bit too, I mean, for me, I'm generally more about pedals. That's where I like to get my stuff from. You could definitely use that overdrive. It's probably not to my taste. It's a bit, it reminds me of something like the Smashing Pumpkins or something. It's got that really like crunchy, sort of fuzzy kind of territory sound to it, which is absolutely, you know, cracking for certain types of things. But I'm generally, you know, more into like a smooth, kind of, I don't know how you describe it, like, yeah, just a smoother overdrive is what I'm usually after, which is what I tend to get from my pedals. But, you know, hey, totally use that if that's the kind of thing you want. And I'm sure you could dial it in to be, you know, where you want it to be. But yeah, those are the sounds from those guitars, and they all takes it all really well. You know, P90 sounded great, really thick. Telecaster nice and clean. So yeah, anyway, I'm going to do a bit of a close out with some closing thoughts in a different outfit. Yeah, I'm aware my outfit changes like crazy throughout this video, but I'm filming this over like a number of weeks, so I haven't got the sort of t-shirt regime lined up yet, so you'll just have to bear with me. But anyway, on to my outro. So, having played through this fella for quite a bit, and the Super Crush and also the Laney lead top, using them frequently for recording and practicing, it's kind of made me come to a few conclusions about where these kind of products sit in the market. Now, this has been done to death, obviously, the thing about, you know, valve amps versus solid state, whether it's worth, you know, the money and all that. But I think I've got a bit of a fresh take on the whole thing, and here it is. So I feel like at the moment, the high end, or the expensive end is what I'm saying, of the gear market, the amplifier market, is dominated by very sort of high priced valve amps. You can get cheaper valve amps, obviously, and they probably fall in the same realm as these. But like the high priced sort of boutique-ish, or like, you know, sort of things made in the UK or hand wired, those kind of things on the premium end of the sort of analog amp market. And then you've got some very high priced modelers as well, sort of, you know, things like the Helix or the Kemper sort of stuff, and like, I think stuff like the Helix is a good value for money, don't get me wrong. You know, the amount of functionality you get from that and the quality of the sounds are very, very good for, you know, it is expensive, but, you know, you get something that's going to be very, very usable. But I feel like where things like these solid state amps come in is that you get something that the modelers don't really give you, and the more expensive tube amps, with them being so expensive, or kind of prohibitively expensive for a lot of people. But what you get from these as solid state amps is you get, especially with the quality of something like this and the Super Crush and the lead top, the quality is so good now, and the in-room feel, which I think is really important, because a lot of the time in the past when I've used solid state amps, sometimes in the room, especially when you're playing, you know, with a live band, they can kind of just get lost and you don't get that sort of oomph, that low end sort of response that you get from valve amps. Whereas with these current crop of solid states, I don't know what they've done, but it seems like they can really sort of handle themselves in that situation. And as soon as that becomes a thing, all of a sudden you've got a really inexpensive amplifier, something that feels like a tube amp because it's got the same, footprint and the same sort of tactile feel to it. You've got that, but it's at an incredibly affordable price. And at that point, it makes me kind of think, it kind of clicks with me that like that's where these things sit in the market and why I feel like they still are a thing and they're still around. Because if you're like me, you still kind of like that feel, and it's kind of, I know it's like clinging onto a tradition, but you can't help what you like. And for me, I like an amplifier, but my income and brain don't really allow me to just spaff a lot of money on something super expensive. But this ticks the box, and I feel like that's kind of the niche that these things have at the moment, is that like you still get that amplifier, that analog amp feel, and they're so good now that the difference in price between sort of the solid state HiWatt, the Super Leads, and the valve sort of counterparts, it's like magnitudes higher. You're talking like 380 to £2,500 to £3,000. Granted, there's the whole thing about where they're manufactured. This is manufactured in China, whereas I think those amps are made in Britain, and I think they're like hand wired, a lot of them. So there is that. The cost and the labour goes up, which you can have an ethical debate about that as well, about how you feel about that. But when it comes to crunch for the consumer who's buying this thing and wants an amp that's going to do the job, I think these are really hard to beat. And I just think it's a conversation more people should be having. And like, these solid state amps are not the solid state amps that you have in your brain when you hear about them, like these kind of like tinny, thin sounding things. That they really aren't. They're really good quality amplifiers at a fraction of the price of a full-fledged tube amp, and you're getting the amp experience without having to pay for it. And yeah, that's where I think they fit in the market, and I think they're a really good alternative to modelling, if that's not the sort of thing you're into, but you also can't afford to fork out for a tube amp. So yeah, I'm going to wrap it up here, but I just thought I had something a bit more new to say for the conversation. And I just wanted to, have a bit of an introspective outro. But yeah, to cut a long story short, I think these fill a gap in the market that modelers and tube amps just aren't at the moment. And I would strongly recommend taking a look at them if you kind of feel a bit alienated by both of those things. But anyway, I will see you again in the future when time and energy allows. And in the meantime, stay safe, and I'll catch you in the next one.